Hey guys, I just wanted to share the second point that is part of this message that I'm doing right now. Um, if you missed the first one that I did, it was first of all, the title is "In the Valley of Our Crisis," and if you missed the first one that I did, it talks about how a crisis reveals our testimony and uh, the reason why. And then I went on to share a little bit about my testimony. You can catch that on my Facebook page if you're interested in that. But the reason why I talk about that is because I wanted to focus on how crises in our lives become big, decisive moments for us as individuals. And what that means is that it creates opportunity for us to grow and for us to mature, for us to not only do we experience hardship in those times, but how we tend to learn from those hardships, and we grow in those hardships. And I share that right now my family is going through a rough time in terms of the loss of my brother-in-law and adjusting to a life without him in it, as well as trying to find what you would define as a new normal. And and that's not easy. It's only been 2 weeks. 2 weeks of still trying to figure out, we still find ourselves asking the questions. Why? Why would you allow him to die? We know that he's no longer suffering, but at the same time, it doesn't take away from the pain that our heart feels when we think of him and when we are reminded of his life. And so, yesterday I shared the definition of crisis, and the first definition talks about emotionally significant event or radical change of status in somebody's life. And the second one is the decisive moment, and that's the part I wanted to focus more. But honestly, both of those apply here for me. And when it comes to my testimony, it was an emotionally significant event that created the testimony for me in terms of what happened to my brother Stefano and to what I'm dealing with right now. But what I come to realize is, going based off of that, is that a crisis, not only does it reveal your testimony, but it helps to deepen your faith. I talked about that a little bit last night. As I said already, a crisis forces our faith to deepen. When I look back at my experience with my brother and the things that he went through, but at the same time witnessing how my parents handled it and how they walked through it, and how I got a chance to walk through it with them, and we walked through it together as a family. As you're walking through something, you're not thinking of the future. You're not thinking of how that's gonna possibly be a positive witness and later on in life, or how that's gonna how your suffering is gonna help somebody. Because when you're in the midst of suffering, all you see is the pain of it all. And when you're in the midst of all that, you begin to question God, and you begin to ask God, what is going on? What's happening? And what that does, it shifts your focus to where you start to search God. You start to seek Him out more. You start to because you want answers, so you begin to pursue Him, and that causes your relationship with God to grow. I talked about how I witnessed my mom's faith and how she walked through it with strong faith and came out with an even stronger faith at the end of it. And it was the same for me as I spent time pursuing God, as I spent time asking God, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to handle this? How am I supposed to move forward? How am I supposed to focus and do what I'm supposed to? He he begins to give me that peace that I needed. He began to give me the things that I needed to strengthen me to be able to do the things that I needed to do. But he also gave me the faith to know that he had it all under control. See, the truth is, the problem with our situations and our crises is that more often than not, when something happens, it is beyond our control. And so we struggle with it. We struggle with that because we like being in control, and we want to believe that it's all gonna work out, and but sometimes we just don't see how it's all gonna work out, and that's okay. See, we're allowed to feel those things. We have to remember that tomorrow isn't guaranteed, but eternity through Christ is. When we look at our lives and we look at the things that we're going through even today, maybe you're not a believer. If you're watching this, maybe you're not a believer. Maybe you're just looking for some encouragement. And if you are a believer, this means something to you. See, our faith strengthens us and also reaffirms who our hope is in. What that means is that when we look at the things that we're going through, even if we don't have the answers or the understanding of what's happening, we have strong enough faith to say, okay, God, you are in control of this. I don't know how this is going to work out. I don't know what's going to happen, but you can take it. You see, the questions that we have to ask ourselves is whether or not I can trust, and I put I in there, and you can put yourself in this too. Whether or not I can trust God with my everything. If you trusted Him to be your salvation, to save you from your sin, but do you trust Him to save you from your crisis? See, our crisis can make us stronger, but it all depends on how we approach it. Hebrews chapter 3 verse 3 through 6 says, "But Jesus deserves far more glory than Moses. Just as a person who builds a house deserves more praise than the house itself. For every house has a builder, but the one who built everything is God. Moses was certainly faithful in God's house as a servant, and his work was an illustration of the truth God would reveal later. But Christ, as the Son, is in charge of God's entire house, and we are God's house. If we keep our courage and remain confident in our hope in Christ." So it's if you know a little bit about Moses, then you know that he was a man that was called by God to be the one to lead his people out of Egypt. See, they had been in Egypt for 400 years as slaves to the Egyptians, and now God was going to free them, but He chose Moses to be the one that would lead them out of Egypt. And so, first off, Moses didn't feel very confident in his ability to speak and do what God was calling him to do, so God assigned him his brother Aaron to help him through all that. And he followed through with what God told him, did everything God told him, and so he took the people out of Egypt and brought them closer to the land that God had promised them. And so he was faithful as a servant because he did everything that God told him to do. That's not to say that he didn't make any mistakes along the way, because if you notice, if you remember in the story, the Israelites were driving him up the wall, and there were points where he, out of anger, he still did what he was supposed to, but out of anger he allowed his anger to take control of him. And for a lot of us, sometimes we feel the same way. Let's be honest with ourselves. We're going through something that we just don't see how we're going to come out of, and sometimes we take that frustration that we are feeling, we take that whatever it may be that we're feeling, and you know, we we take it out on others. We may not mean to do it, but we sometimes do take out the frustrations that we're feeling on those that are closest to us. And maybe some of us find ourselves in that position today where we're asking, we're trying to figure out, well, how am I going to provide for my family? How am I going to do this and do that and do all these things and take care of my kids still, and I can't give them what they need. I can't give them what they want or what they need to have. And so we get frustrated because everything's out of control right now. Nothing is going as we'd like it to be, and we don't see the good in any of it. But this passage reminds us that Jesus is even bigger than, in this passage, he's talking about a comparison between Jesus and Moses. Jesus is even bigger and far more deserving of glory than Moses. See, Jesus is God, and therefore all authority under heaven and earth was given to him. And so therefore, if we believe in him, then we believe that he can help us through our situations. See, that's where our faith comes in. That's where our desire to grow closer to him, or desire for more, comes in, and more of him, more of a faith that will hopefully get stronger. I said before that how we approach our situations is very important. If we approach it with a hopelessness type of attitude, then we're not gonna come out of it stronger. But if we approach it with an attitude of, I don't know what's happening, but I'm gonna learn through this, I'm gonna grow through this, and at the end of this, I'm gonna become stronger. See, are you taking the time to ask God how he can use you in this time, in this season? Because it's not all about you or me. As God's people, we have an opportunity to be Christ's representatives to others. How are you being a representative of Christ to the people around you? I know a lot of us are stuck at home. In fact, right now I'm stuck at home. I can't go anywhere. It's just me, Holly, and Kara. It's just the three of us at home. We can't even leave the house, and so we're like self-quarantining, which has been very interesting and very fun, because I've been, our family is definitely drawing closer through this time, and I had a chance to spend a lot of time with my wife as well as with my daughter. Time that I, would be missing out on if I was constantly working and out and doing something else. And so I'm thankful that I'm able to spend time with her. In fact, this morning, I sat on the couch listening to a song, a worship song, and she and I were just, I was singing it and she was singing along with it to the best of her ability, which was really cool and exciting for me, just to see her reaction, because she loves music as much as I do. Uh, Hebrews 3:12-14 tells us, "Be careful then, dear brothers and sisters, make sure that your own hearts are not evil and unbelieving. Turning you away from the living God, you must warn each other every day while it is still today, so that none of you will be deceived by sin and hardened against God. For if we are faithful to the end, trusting God just as firmly as when we first believed, we will share in all that belongs to Christ. Will you still trust Him as much as you did when you first came to Christ, as you do now, as you should now? Do you have the faith? Are you, maybe if you lack the faith, maybe that's something you should be praying for in this season, is that God would give you the faith to come out of this stronger than before. You know, during these last couple days, I don't even know what day I'm on anymore for the prayer and fasting that I have been doing. And this week, my focus has been, as we're coming closer to Easter, my focus has been lifting up people that I know personally that don't know Christ. Praying that God would open up opportunities for them to hear the gospel, but not just hear the gospel, but to be transformed by it. And it's funny, there was originally supposed to be a 14 days prayer and fasting that was supposed to end this Friday on the 10th, but I added seven more days to it, so it'd be 21 days in total instead of 14, where I've shifted my focus to focus on specific people, specific families that I know personally, that I've met, that I want to see have an encounter with Christ, have a life changing experience,